Don't worry, fight fans, because after the top knockouts from 2023, we have prepared something for the grappling audience as well. The UFC was top-notch this year, so let's take a look at what kind of submissions were performed under their lights. UFC 284, Jack Della Maddalena versus Randy Brown. First up is Jack Maddalena, who was on fire with his 3 performances this year. His opponent was Randy Brown on UFC 284, a well-rounded fighter with 4 consecutive wins in UFC. Jack, on the other hand, brought his incredible 14-fight winning streak home to Australia in front of his crowd and extended it there with a submission victory. Maddalena, who has 11 knockouts on his record, managed to hit overconfident Randy with a right hook halfway through the round. After he visibly shook his opponent's mental state, he hunted him down in an instant. But when Brown did not surrender during further blows and wanted to escape, Jack climbed on his back and made him tap. Maddalena did not think twice about climbing him. It's an understatement to say that the audience was delighted, and it was probably the most important fight in his career to this day. It's always amazing to see a knockout artist taking a submission win. The Australian fighter defeated Basil Hafif and Kevin Holland by a split decision for the remainder of the year, and he could shine again early in 2024, so we could probably watch him against someone from the top 15. UFC 285, Valentina Shevchenko versus Alexa Grasso. The Polish kickboxer has had 7 successful defenses in the UFC flyweight division before splitting against Alexa Grasso in March earlier this year. At UFC 285, the crowd chanted Valentina's name, showing love and support for the dominant champion. She performed as well as ever. However, the Mexican turned out to be a tough girl. While everybody thought Valentina would be too much for her, exchanging blows with the Shevchenko was never a joke, but Grasso was always there to press with attacks. Although the champion had led in signature strikes, takedowns, and even control, Alexa was resourceful when she needed it the most. After Shevchenko attempted a spinning back kick and missed, Grasso took advantage, quickly climbed the champion's back, and ended Valentina's reign with a tight face crank. A huge upset in the last moments of the match, and the girl showed MMA in full glory. To make things even crazier, after everyone thought Grasso got lucky in the match, she returns half a year later and secures the championship spot with a split decision. However, with her dominant reign, Valentina secured a trilogy fight with Alexa Grasso at the beginning of next year. Both suffered injuries, but they say that the recovery is going well, and we already know what to expect for the third time. UFC 290, Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. Another tough Mexican with a submission win is the unpredictable Yair Rodriguez. At UFC 284 in early February, Yair spoiled the plans of Josh Emmett in the fight for the interim featherweight title. Always creative, Rodriguez threw punches and kicks with full force, and looking at Josh Emmett, he was more than willing to fight. Yair was as electrifying as ever, and the sounds of hits echoed throughout the 2 rounds. He had successful kicking from a distance, and whenever Emmett was close, he aimed for the head. They were hurting each other badly, but Yair was in his element, having more success in stand-up. The Mexican was thorough and precise with his shots, and his creativity was, as always, at a high level. Josh finally manages to get another takedown and does so by cutting off one of Yair's relentless attacks featuring a flying knee. After being taken to the ground, he had to act quickly, which he did. The Mexican from the bottom position in the style of Tony Ferguson inflicted damage with elbows, locking his opponent in a triangle and pressuring him into submission, securing a title unification with Volkanovski later this year. UFC 291, Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green. At UFC 291, which took place at the end of July, a lightweight fight happened between Bobby Green and Tony Ferguson. Both fighters, with their strange guards and ways of fighting, brought over 80 matches of experience combined. Knowing both of them, if they had been told the day before that they should fight, they probably would have accepted, and the audience got what they expected. Jokes aside, the final result was more than unexpected. Ferguson returned after 5 losses in a row, trying to turn the tide, and Bobby, as always, came for a fight and a paycheck. King Green had a double strikeout success against Tony through 3 rounds, looking super quick against a washed-out Ferguson and stifling his takedown attempts. Watching Ferguson lose was never easy, and Bobby succeeded in cutting his face open. Things got even worse for the former interim champion. Green got into a top position, and after punishing El Kukui, he managed to transition from half guard and catch Tony in an arm triangle choke. There was no doubt that Ferguson wouldn't tap, but the fact that Bobby Green finished him with a submission 10 seconds before the end is mind-blowing. UFC Fight Night, Gavin Tucker versus Diego Lopez. We advise all fight fans to remember the name Diego Lopez, who this year appeared for the UFC and had 3 top matches. Although he lost his debut, Diego gave a superb performance. We've prepared more about that interesting story in the next video. In his second bout at UFC on ESPN 50, his opponent was Gavin Tucker, a featherweight fighter from Canada who has been competing for the UFC for 6 years. Lopez came for another submission, whose record of 23 wins is decorated with 21 finishes. Tucker opened the match with strikes, and Lopez was patient on the other side. After a minute of fighting, Gavin takes a single leg, which turns out to be a crucial mistake against the Brazilian black belt, who threw himself on his back with an already prepared triangle. All Diego had to do was adjust the submission pressure, and the Canadian was forced to tap. Diego Lopez took home the performance of the night bonus again with the 11th triangle armbar submission in the UFC. Next year is going to be golden for this man, mark our words, who's only 28 years old. UFC 294, Muhamad Mokaev versus Tim Elliot. Another name to watch out for is Muhamad Mokaev. The undefeated Dagestani English sensation secured 11 victories in just 3 years of professional competition, rapidly climbing the UFC rankings. His opponent at UFC 294 was an MMA veteran and former title challenger, Tim Elliot. Muhamad was set to slip as soon as he got a more experienced fighter, but he showed his hunger would not be quenched so easily. According to what was said, Elliot, a more experienced fighter, entered the match pretty relaxed and secured a takedown in 30 seconds. The American led in signature strikes throughout the 3 rounds, while the Englishman led in takedowns and ground control. Tim pushed Muhamad to his limits and gave him a good fight. He had a couple of submission attempts, but Mokaev is known for almost getting submitted, but always getting out. After more wrestling through 3 rounds than striking, Mokaev manages to land an arm triangle choke with 2 minutes to finish off Elliot, and thus moves one step closer to the title with the 6th submission to his name. UFC Fight Night, Shawn Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. The match that took place at UFC on ESPN 52 happened a couple of weeks ago and hosted 2 American welterweight fighters. UFC veteran Kelvin Gastelum is coming off a win in April with this colorful score, and Shawn Brady aims to return to the winning ways after his first career loss to Mohammed Belal. Already in the first minute, Shawn reached the takedown in the back of the opponent, who somehow managed to get out. However, Shawn took him down again and got the back, where he spent the rest of the round. The second round went the same way, and Kelvin had a tough time in an inferior position. Even in the third round, Shawn didn't give Gastelum space. Brady took him down again, but this time, he managed to pack a hellish Kimura, forcing his opponent to surrender the match by ripping his shoulder. Bradley once again showed how dangerous he is to the rest of the welterweight division, and poor Kevin, who was once a title challenger, could not find his way to victory. UFC Fight Night, Nikita Krylov versus Ryan Spann. In March at UFC Fight Night on the main card, American fighter Ryan Spann and Russian fighter Nikita Krylov faced off in a catchweight fight. Considering Krylov has 28 finishes out of 30 wins and Spann 18 out of 21, it was safe to assume that this matchup wouldn't make it to the second round. Whoever thought so was right. Both of them went into an exchange without any calculation, which took them to the ground. After a solid grappling display, Spann tried to set up a Darce choke, and Krylov worked his way up into a dominant position to turn the tide in his favor. When Nikita got to the back, he took Spann down, who was doing well into the scramble, avoiding the danger. A lot of submission attempts happened in the first few minutes of the first round, but Ryan made a mistake with a ground and pound attempt, which led him straight into a tight triangle of Nikita, who managed to finish the match. Yeah, it must have been satisfying for Krylov to submit an American fighter as the crowd chanted, USA. These were just some of the best submissions of this year, and join us in the next video of our 2023 UFC Greatest X Series, which will feature some of the best performances from this year. We hope you enjoyed the thrilling moments. We'll see you soon, and don't forget to tap.